when transparency people in the open government sphere just get data and open it and release it to the public right away and trust that the public body has done not only everything they can possibly do, but what actually 100% needs to be done to de-identify data where it needs to be done. So one of the findings was they lack the processes to make sure they're not disclosing materials that may raise privacy or public safety concerns. That's kind of terrifying. It should be for privacy people. Can you elaborate on that finding a little bit?
Yeah, the issue there has to do with, and I think you articulated this well, there's a balancing to be done in this and in, as you say, many, many other situations where not that these things are in conflict, but there is some sort of notional tension between transparency and privacy. And in fact, transparency and very legitimate concerns in some situations about information which is law enforcement sensitive. There really is some information which is not appropriate for public release. And so our concern there, what we're getting at there in the piece that you read, is the notion that CPD's release of information is all at once risks being over-inclusive and under-inclusive. So for all the reasons we've been talking about, right, there's this risk that they are not producing information they should be producing. And at the same time, we raise this concern about there being inadequate review of the information that they are releasing to determine whether it includes any information that, for any of the reasons we've talked about, shouldn't be publicly released, whether it has to do with, the privacy of individuals, or it's, sensitive for law enforcement reasons, or in fact, it's protected from review by law, any number of those circumstances.
Yeah, and we've always battled that they criminal justice agencies, in my experience, doing this a very long time now, have wielded privacy as a way to shield any insight into what they're doing and to shield their responsibility to respond to FOIA. And I think the agencies themselves they should just immediately sit down and say, and make public, these are the fields we're not going to release. To me, this seems like a much easier issue. These are the fields we're not going to release pursuant to any FOIA. We think this is legitimate. We've had it reviewed by our lawyers. There are ways of doing it. But I think, just like we're talking about them not having policies to do this professionally across the agency, I'm not surprised that they're accidentally over-releasing things. We have gotten, without saying who gave it to us, we have gotten released data that we were assured had no identifiers in it. And it was a very large data set. And there were identifiers of people related to the case in there that should not have been in there.
Yeah.
And
so I should say, we did not find any specific examples where information had been appropriately released. What we were sort of identifying was, again, the risk of that happening, the fact that there's nothing in place to prevent that from happening.
When you're talking 15,000 plus subpoenas in a 3-month period, let's just extrapolate that and say that holds for a year. That's over 60,000 releases of information. If they don't have the controls, odds are statistically it's happened once, right? Generally.
So I think
statistically,
the framing of this report kind of comes largely out of that sort of logic, right? We're identifying risks here, and the volume of the operation is such that risks, even if they happen in a small, even if they kind of play out in a small percentage of cases, are of enormous concern.